Hi guys, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be going over the proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation approach known as PNF. And in honor of 2016's anniversary, the golden era of makeup, I'm going to be filming a makeup tutorial. Let's get started. So the proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation approach, or PNF, is a multisensory approach that uses diagonal and spiral movement patterns of the upper extremity and lower extremity and trunk to help support coordination, motor control, and improve functional movement. PNF is often used to treat numerous neurologic, musculoskeletal, and general medical conditions. Also, it has been demonstrated to reduce falls in older adults. So in this video, I'm mainly going to go over the unilateral patterns. I could go over bilateral patterns, but I noticed majority of the time I was doing my makeup with one hand, and the bilateral patterns that were incorporated isn't a really good example. So the two unilateral patterns in PNF is diagonal 1 and diagonal 2, or D1 and D2. So in D1, you're going to go into a diagonal pattern where the arm moves up and across the body. In this pattern, the shoulder is going into flexion, adduction, and external rotation, with the arm rotating out as it comes across. So this part of the video where I'm applying my foundation is a good example of a D1 flexion pattern because you see my arm moving up and across the body. So if you ever forget what D1 flexion looks like, think of D yawn flexion, as it looks like you're bringing your hand towards your mouth and face like you're covering a yawn. So moving on to D1 extension. D1 extension is basically the reverse of D1 flexion, as the shoulders will go into extension, abduct, and go into internal rotation. Functionally, this looks like you're reaching down to your side, pushing your arm away from your body, or picking up or placing an object down. So in the video, you can see me reaching for my makeup bag and placing it back down. This would be considered a D1 extension and flexion pattern. So when you think about D1 movement patterns, think about moving your arm across your body. If you ever forget what D1 looks like, think of D yawn flexion and then move your arm the opposite way. So D yawn and then moving your arm down to the ground. Moving on, D2 flexion is a pattern where the arm moves up and out away from the body. Basically doing ta-da, where you go into shoulder flexion, abduction, and external rotation. Basically, it comes up like you're showing off what you did. Functionally, this looks like you're reaching up to grab something off a shelf on the same side of the extremity. So in this clip right here where I'm applying my powdered blush, is a great example of D2 flexion, where you can see me moving my arm up and away from the body on the same side of the arm. So same thing with D1 flexion and extension. D2 extension will be the opposite of D2 flexion. So instead of going up and out, the arms will move down and across the body in a diagonal. Kind of think of like unsheathing your sword or buckling your seatbelt. So in this part of the video where I'm doing my eyeliner, I think it's a great example of D2 flexion and extension. So in D2 flexion, I'm bringing my hand up and out, creating that wing, and then in D2 extension is bringing that wing back to the eyes, connecting it with the rest of the eyeliner. So that is the D2 flexion and extension pattern. So if you ever forget what a D2 flexion and extension pattern looks like, think of D2, ta-da, where a magician is showing off what he just did, a knight pulling out his sword ready for battle. You could think of Mario doing the peace sign, or think of a driver getting his seatbelt in using his left hand. I know I said I wasn't going to go over bilateral PNF patterns, but I think this shot of me putting on my eyelashes is a great example of symmetrical, asymmetrical, and reciprocal patterns. So I'm just going to be talking about those three. Bilateral PNF patterns are basically two patterns used on both sides. It could be the same pattern, different patterns, or they could be the same pattern on the same side or different pattern on same side. So in this clip right here where I'm applying my lash glue, you see both of my hands are following a D1 flexion pattern. So that would be considered a symmetrical pattern. And in this video where I'm taking the lash glue out of the tube, my left hand is going into a D1 flexion pattern, and then my right hand is going into a D2 flexion pattern. That would be considered a reciprocal, as both arms are moving in opposite directions. So I'm going to go back to this video to talk about asymmetrical patterns, which is basically both arms will follow the same pattern on the same side of the body. So you see me putting on my bottom eyeliner, both going into D1 flexion, just trying to steady my eyelid and then apply the liner. So that is all I have for this video. I hope you learned a thing or two about the PNF pattern, and this is the final makeup look.